Three inconceivable stories formed together to become the inspiration for the 5th season of American Horror Story, Hotel. A Hungarian noblewoman who was the world's most prolific female murderer, an American serial killer who allegedly built a murder castle, and an infamous hotel with a history of mysterious deaths. What are the dark details that inspired the writers of American Horror Story to create this bone-chilling season? Hello everybody, and welcome back to Coffee Beans and Horror Fiends. If you are new here, welcome. On this channel, we discuss all things horror while staying heavily caffeinated. And this is a triple, the trifecta, a triad of caffeination. Actually, you know what? It's kind of like the caffeinated triad squared, because Coca-Cola released a coffee refresher. Yup. So yeah, Coca-Cola released these coffee drinks, and I needed to know. I needed to know what the 411 was with this. Oh my god, I totally am giving my age away.
So you're like basically 30? What?
The 411. I remember when that was in my little Lizzie McGuire handbook. I had everything Lizzie McGuire growing up, let's be real. To my shame and to my embarrassment, not even. Hilary Duff is great. I had a shrine of her. I loved Hilary Duff. Metamorphosis? Name a better album. Queen, Sheer Heart Attack. But anyway, I'm getting way off topic. Anywho, Coca-Cola refers to these as a beverage refresher. Is that what they call it? But I'm excited. I'm gonna put a picture up while I talk about it as well, like a better picture over here or there, who knows where. So Coca-Cola claims that this, quote, refreshment coffee sips like a Coke and finishes like a coffee. I don't know how I feel about that, but okay. Giving Coca-Cola fans and Java lovers alike a refreshing and reinvigorating reset to their daily routine. I mean, I'm in it. So we will be trying that bad boy for our coffee beans part, and for our horror part, of course. This is really exciting for me because this is the start of a new series within my series of Coffee Beans and Horror Fiends, and it revolves around one of my favorite shows of all time. Obviously, within this series and within this episode, I'm going to be going into the stories that inspired each season. And this season and this episode is going to be all about Hotel. And this is going to be something kind of weird, but kind of exciting for me anyway. It's sort of a collaboration with myself. I actually am trying all of the flavors of this Coke drink. There are 3 separate ones. I'm trying one on my podcast as I rank all seasons of American Horror Story. Sorry for that clinging. I'm gonna put that down so I stop making obnoxious noises. And then for the 3rd flavor, I'm gonna be trying that, like just pouring it, making like a cool TikTok with it. So if you care about those, I'll have it on TikTok. I'll have it on my podcast, Netflix Coffee and Questioning Humanity, which is streaming on all major platforms everywhere. Well, mostly everywhere. I'll link all of that below, including all my socials. If you're interested in this concoction, or if you're interested in just, you know, hearing more of me, because why wouldn't you? Okay. It's time. Yeah, that's just...
Nah. Not for me. Not for me. There's something in that tastes like
That's just not good. Wow, that tastes like... It tastes like flat Coke. Like, it tastes like flat Coke. Which you'd think it would be like extra intense Coke because it's caffeinated. That's...
This might be a bad idea, this might be a bad idea, this might be a bad idea, this might be a bad idea.
Yeah, that's really... Nope. Yeah, that was disappointing. Okay, moving right along. Oh, it leaves like the grodiest aftertaste in the roof of that is Nope, no. I want all $1 hair and 88 cents of my money back. Coca-Cola. Maybe it's just the flavor. I'm gonna try the vanilla one on my podcast, and I'll try the caramel one later, but that was an experience. And I'm gonna need you to mind your business because I know you saw this Shamrock Shake sitting in the background the whole time, but I'm gonna need you to mind your business.
Mind your business, that's all. Mind your business.
Get you a Shamrock Shake instead, okay? This is where it's at. Moving on, if you are unfamiliar with American Horror Story because you've been living under a rock or something, it's a horror anthology series that follows a unique storyline each and every season. Season 5 centers all around the mysterious Hotel Cortez, which is inspired by the infamous Hotel Cecil. Hotel Cecil opened in 1927. It was a glamorous destination and had an upscale clientele. 2 years after its opening, Wall Street crashed and the Great Depression followed. The economic downfall led to the deterioration of local areas around the hotel, like Skid Row. Along with the economic decline, Hotel Cecil also faced a rapid decline and soon became infamous for being the location of many deaths. 2 serial killers, Richard Ramirez and Jack Unterweger, were known to have stayed at the hotel. Recently, a Netflix documentary did air called Crime Scene: The Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel. It has been incredibly popular and is actually in the top 10 titles on Netflix right now. Something that stood out to me in this documentary was the former general manager of the hotel saying that in her time working for the hotel between 2007 and 2017, I believe she said, she knew of 80 deaths. Why can't I? That's just a word that I can't do. Deaths. Such a dark word that I just can't say properly. So I'm sorry. I don't mean to make it like funny. With that being said, I don't want to come off insensitive in any way. I also find it kind of weird to talk about death in detail, especially within these disturbing ways. I believe there are some notable events that have happened and notable deaths that have taken place that are very important when telling the story of the Hotel Cecil. One being the most notorious, I guess you could say, was the death of Eliza Lamb. There was also Elizabeth Short, who you may know as the Black Dahlia. She's linked to the hotel mostly because it's believed that she had drinks at the bar the night that she died, but she was found in a park actually sort of close to the hotel. It has never been proven whether Elizabeth Short was actually drinking at the bar. It's just a common belief people seem to have. There were other deaths caused from strangulation, gunshot wounds, poisoning. Also, there were more deaths from being pushed from windows, jumping from windows, or just accidentally falling out of windows. The hotel is no longer open. In 2014, the hotel was purchased for $30 million and it was shut down for complete renovation. It's supposed to, or was supposed to open later this year, but it has been at an indefinite halt. The tragedy that occurred in this hotel was a major inspiration for season 5 of American Horror Story. But an even bigger inspiration was another hotel, one that many believe exists, but it may not have existed at all. And the person that's linked to this alleged hotel was a massive, massive inspiration behind one of the most unforgettable characters in season 5. The Hotel Cortez was inspired by quite a few establishments. Of course, the aforementioned Hotel Cecil, the Winchester House, which I just happened to do a video on not too long ago. Quick shameless plug there. But it is really a fascinating story, I can't lie. The Hotel Cortez, though, was heavily inspired by an alleged murder castle that was linked to the American serial killer H.H. Holmes. H.H. Holmes was also the main inspiration for the character Mr. March. The story behind the serial killer was that he lured victims back to his monstrous torture chamber hotel. H.H. Holmes, aka Herman Webster Mudgett, which was his real name, was born on May 16th in 1861 in Gilmanton, New Hampshire. He was born into an affluent family and was unusually intelligent at a young age. The intelligence led him to be interested in medicine and surgery. Those interests turned dark and he practiced on animals. It is also said that he may have been responsible for a friend's death as well. Herman Webster Mudgett was a con artist and a bigamist who was one of America's first serial killers. It is believed that he killed between 20 to 200 people. H.H. Holmes's life of crime began with various frauds and scams. As a medical student at the University of Michigan, he stole corpses and used them to make false insurance claims. He also may have used the bodies for experiments as well. In 1885, he moved to Chicago and found work in a pharmacy using his new infamous alias, Dr. Henry H. Holmes. He later took over the business, and it's rumored that he killed the original owner. Holmes had a 3-story building constructed nearby, which many say he turned into a torture castle that contained small rooms where he would torture and kill victims, and trap doors that allowed him to discreetly dispose of the bodies. It's also rumored that the basement had a crematorium and even a gas chamber. There is no evidence that Holmes trapped strangers inside his hotel. 9 people for certain were murdered, but most likely these were people he knew, according to the History Channel, opposed to the other speculations of him murdering random strangers that he would lure back to his hotel. The History Channel even claimed the building Holmes owned wasn't even a hotel. The first floor consisted of storefronts, and the second floor had apartments for long-term rentals. Holmes continued his fraudulent schemes for years, which led to his arrest in 1894. Investigators soon began to suspect him of murdering his scammer associate, Benjamin Peitzel, then murdered Peitzel's 3 young children in an attempt to cover it up. After Holmes's arrest, newspapers began printing stories about his alleged murder castle. The details in the papers were sensationalized and occurred at a time when journalism started exaggerating or just plain making stories up. These stories muddied the details of what was true and what was not. A more likely situation is that Holmes murdered a woman he had an affair with, who was also involved in his fraudulent schemes. It is also likely that he murdered her 6-year-old child as well. Holmes admitted to murdering the woman, but he claims it was accidental. It's still unclear what happened to her and her daughter. Over the next 2 years, Holmes may have murdered 3 women who had personal and business relationships with him. It's still unknown what happened to those women as well. Eventually, Holmes was convicted for the murder of Ben Peitzel and was hanged a week before his 35th birthday. Finally, there is the Countess, who, funnily enough, I was going to do an entire video based on the person who inspired the Countess before I even knew I wanted to do this series and before I even knew that she inspired this character. And as I started researching her, I was like, I think this is too much. It gets wicked dark. I'm not even trying to be a sensitive little snowflake. That's not how I am. For someone like me, I find this obviously very disturbing, but very interesting. I listen to cult podcasts and serial killer podcasts and true crime podcasts, and I love them. So this may be up your alley, but I'm just, once again, letting people know, like, hey, this might get a little cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Just throwing that out there.
Things are gonna get crazy.
Countess Elizabeth Johnson was inspired by a real-life Countess Elizabeth Bathory. And if you don't know Elizabeth Bathory, buckle yourself
All the way up.
In late December, around the year 1609, an investigator visited the castle that Bathory was living in Hungary, on orders from King Matthias, and discovers the real-life countess directing a torture session of young girls. Bathory was already infamous in the area for torture and murder of servants and peasants, but her title and relatives in high places had, until this point, made her untouchable. Bathory was born in Transylvania in 1560 to a distinguished family of kings, cardinals, knights, and judges, as well as family members who were into more darker interests. Her uncle allegedly instructed her in Satanism, and her aunt may have taught her about sadomasochism. At age 15, she married Count Natity.
This man and this woman should not be joined in marriage. Speak now or forever hold your peace.
Yeah. Because she's a bitch with no conscience, no mercy, no soul.
Oh, Liz. Ignore her. She drinks.
And the couple settled into the Sezda castle. The Count wanted to please his wife, so he built her a torture chamber. Her torture was extensive. She would cover young servant girls in honey, then leave them outside to be devoured by insects. She even would force the young girls to take deadly ice baths. The Countess's behavior only worsened after her husband died. With the help of her former nurse and a local witch, Elizabeth Bathory began abducting peasant girls to torture and kill. She would bite chunks of flesh from her victims and force the child to cook it and consume it. Equally as disturbing, Bathory believed human blood would keep her looking young and healthy. After being caught in the act of torture years after the horror being ignored, she was put on trial. The only reason why the king was like, whoa, whoa, slow your roll, was because Elizabeth started abducting children of noble people. And after, of course, being caught in the act, Elizabeth and her cohorts were charged with 80 counts of murder. Some interesting things to know, one being that Elizabeth's bloodline was one of generational inbreeding. She was said to have epileptic seizures and underwent some very interesting procedures or treatments. And in the 1500s, I'm sure epileptic treatment was interesting, to say the least, probably more so traumatizing, especially in this family that was teaching her a child Satanism and sadomasochism. I can't even begin to imagine what those treatments would have been and what the impact of them would be for her growing up. I can only imagine that that did wonders for her psychological development. Another thing that I thought was really interesting that I found was the idea of Elizabeth bathing in these young girls' blood. This is something that if you look up Elizabeth Bathory, it shows up almost always. This detail wasn't mentioned until like 100 years after. It seems to be this invention or folklore.
Okay, girl, Taylor Swift is not a therapist. You need to stop listening to this song on repeat and go get your people-pleasing codependent ass some therapy and listen to some different songs. I can't do this.
It seems to be a really interesting addition to the story, but it's most likely not true. There were many, many witnesses at the trial that were pretty nitty-gritty with their details of what they said Elizabeth did, and not one of them mentioned anything close to her bathing in blood. So again, it probably was just created like as folklore. After being convicted of the murders, Elizabeth was jailed in a strange sort of way. She was a noblewoman, and that meant that she would be imprisoned in her home. But she was confined to a single room that only had like slits for air and food. She did not last very long in those very uncomfortable conditions for her. Elizabeth Bathory's actions, her alleged bloodbaths, why can't I say that word either? Just THS's, baths, death. Sorry, bear with me. Those actions caused many to cite her as the very first vampire. She's even thought to be the inspiration behind Dracula, as well as the Countess Elizabeth Johnson from American Horror Story. This was a heavy one. This was a lot. We made it through it. If you've made it this far, congratulations. Congratulations. Worked so hard, forgot how to vacation.
You have one of the worst voices I've ever heard. Truthfully, it is absolutely terrible.
If you've made it this far, you're just as crazy as me. Be sure to give this video a like if you enjoyed this new series. I know it seems like such a small thing, but for my little infant channel, a like is a huge help. It kind of boosts me up in the algorithm, so if you like it, then YouTube thinks that other people will like it if they see content similar to this. In my mind, I think of a like as a high five and a subscribe as a hug, so do both, do one, do none, that's okay. Thank you for watching. Again, if you'd like to see the part 2 and 3 of this little segment where I try the other flavors of Coke, I am also going to be ranking the American Horror Story seasons on my podcast, Netflix Coffee and Questioning Humanity. I will have that linked in the description box with all of the platforms that it is streaming on, but it is on most streaming platforms. I will also be linking my TikTok. I did a little American Horror Story artwork on the face, and I also tried the vanilla flavor or caramel. I can't remember which is what, but I tried those flavors on those platforms. I will also link my Instagram down below as well if you're not sick of me. Thank you again for watching. Stay caffeinated and stay spooky.